Buggy sound engine. The audio for the Buggy was challenging because we wanted it to feel like a really powerful vehicle that's driving along at super high speed, even though the maps aren't really big enough to support that. And the Buggy doesn't really leave first gear, and it has a top speed of maybe 35 miles an hour. Now, in our defense, 35 miles an hour is still pretty fast, especially back in 2004. In addition to the speed, the driving inputs are really simple. So with a keyboard as your target input device, the player's controls are basically binary. So the Buggy's either accelerating or not accelerating. It's turning fully in one direction or not. So essentially, we need to create all this audio complexity to represent a simulation where the complexity doesn't actually exist. So we build a fake engine for the Buggy's audio. It's got its own transmission, and we combine the player's inputs with data from the physics simulation. We measure the torque on each simulated wheel, whether it's spinning or making contact, and we create a set of looping sounds and then carefully blend between them as the fake engine shifts gears in response to the wheel data. And we just basically kept trying different things. We added more complexity. We did some fine-tuning until the Buggy just feels more fun and sort of rewards you for that feeling of going fast. And most players, they don't really comment on it other than saying the Buggy sounds good. And to us, that's the success, given the amount of craziness that was going on under the hood.
Whenever possible, there's a lot of value in players feeling like they've figured something out on their own. It makes the world feel more alive, rather than just a series of gameplay elements lined up for the player. If we can accept the risk that some percentage of players might miss an element entirely, we can take a more subtle approach. We took this approach with Thumpers, designing setups that players are likely to encounter, but aren't forced to engage with. There are plenty of visual and audio cues, as well as inline reactions, to help the player understand what's happening. It doesn't guarantee all players will figure it out, but playtesting showed that most did.
Antlions. With the player driving the Buggy throughout the coast, we needed a pervasive enemy that could justifiably appear anywhere and act as a constant threat to keep the player in or near their Buggy. Antlions spawning from the sand were the perfect solution. Their high mobility allowed them to keep up with the Buggy for short bursts, unlike our humanoid enemies. Plus, they were very satisfying to run over.
Coast. We wanted a wide open section of the game for the Buggy, but we still needed a way to constrain the player's movement. Choosing a coastline gave us a natural boundary along one side of the map while still feeling open and expansive. It also helped visualize the effects of the Combine's extraction of Earth's resources. Playtesters still tried to swim out to sea, so we added leeches to deter them. The leeches couldn't be a real avoidable enemy that players felt they could fight, so they're a bit magical. Players generally understood that they were pushing the game's boundaries, so we didn't overdevelop them.
Grenade House. A lot of a Half-Life game is about giving players slightly novel combat experiences around each corner, even if they're just small tweaks on previous ones. They don't all have to be skill-based challenges. Sometimes they can just be fun moments where the player gets to enjoy themselves. This Grenade House is one of those moments, with the twist being that we've inverted the usual setup. Instead of letting the player drop grenades on enemies below, we've put the enemies above. The unlimited grenade box is a somewhat clumsy way to encourage players to engage with the scenario, but its invulnerability also ensures the players can still climb up to the floor above, even if they've blown up everything else.
Antlion design. In some of the earliest design work for the game, we had plans for multiple core alien races, with the Combine being just one of them. One of the other races was a religious insectoid species, and antlions were part of that. Later, as we developed Coast, we started viewing them more as pests that came through the Zen portals, along with headcrabs and other creatures. While they aren't actually from Zen, they infest the corners of any world they enter, a lot like cockroaches.
Buggy sound design. The sound design for the buggy was based on samples from an old 1968 Camaro. And we chose that car because they have these amazing V8 engines with just huge pistons. And there's not really another sound like it. It has this sort of gutsy, visceral sound that we were looking for. The transmission also has this really wonderful mechanical whine when it stops accelerating. And that combination felt really responsive within this basically binary input system that we had to work with. So the fake engine transmission wasn't modeled after a real-world car. Instead, it was just designed as a simple system to reward the player for holding down the accelerator. So it's like a looping escalator that produces a rising tone, constantly building tension and shifting gears whenever the tone needs to restart. And since the player would quickly run out of space in our relatively small maps, the goal was just to make accelerating fun for a short period of time.
Buggy birds. In one memorable Coast playtest, a player returned to their vehicle after exploring a house and happened to see a bird flying past. They yelled at the bird, telling it to stay away from their buggy, complaining that birds often foul up their cars in real life. In our post-playtest discussion, we realized that this was the first time we'd had objects separate from the player that the player actually cared about. We saw it as an opportunity to explore, so we built a system to deliver the moment that playtesters feared. When the player leaves their buggy alone for a while and is out of sight, we spawn a seagull at a random location on the vehicle frame. As time goes on, the seagull spawns poop decals on the car body beneath it and continues until the player returns, at which point it flies away. Naturally, playtesters wanted to be able to clean their vehicle, so we added the ability to wash the car by driving it into shallow water. It was late enough in development that we already had the tech for all of this, so the feature was quick to implement. It's one of those cases where we know only a small percentage of players will discover it. But if we can implement these kind of details efficiently and have enough of them, most players will encounter at least one.
Open world loot. The openness of Coast introduced a new problem for us in how we distributed item rewards. In a Half-Life game, we typically reward players for exploring. If you see the way forward but notice something off to the side, there's probably something useful if you take the time to search. When we first started playtesting our Coast maps, we tucked rewards away in the corners of the outdoor areas. However, this led to a worse experience with the buggy. The wide open spaces meant there were always lots of small areas that looked like they might contain something, and players kept stopping and getting out of the buggy to search. It became tedious and interrupted the fun of the level. So, we removed those scattered rewards. But this raised a new problem. How do we tell the player when it's worth getting out of the buggy? After some thought, we established a rule. Any kind of human construction would always come with gameplay content and exploration rewards, while purely natural areas would be left empty. We couldn't tell players this directly, but it aligned well with their natural assumptions, and we reinforced it consistently with areas like this.
Boathouse. In Half-Life 1, we discovered we could get a lot of value from scenarios where different AI enemies fight each other. It's fun for players to watch them engage, and it's much easier to observe enemy behavior when you're not the one that's being threatened. This first encounter between antlions and Combine soldiers is designed to be a fun opportunity to ram something with the buggy, but it also serves to highlight the thumper. By seeing the soldiers use the thumper to hold off antlions, we hope more players would come to understand its purpose. We liked how the soldiers demonstrated the value of staying near the thumper while engaging with the antlions.
Gyorsan az alagsorba! Légitankok várhatók! Cabbage ezredes örülni fog, hogy ideért! Maradjon velem, Freeman! Cabbage ezredes az alagsorban van, Dr. Freeman.
The
Egy ilyen célkövető rakétavetővel már lesz esélyünk.
Laser-guided RPG. The laser guidance feature of the RPG was a huge headache for us because it was difficult to teach. Many playtesters would fire the RPG and then immediately duck behind cover, which meant they didn't see the rocket's flight path. Even worse, they didn't realize the rocket was now turning around to fly back at them. We tried various HUD elements and laser dot indicators to help, but found that most players overlooked them, focusing on the enemy instead. We made as many small improvements as we could, like emphasizing the feature in Odessa's speech and enhancing the audio and visuals around how the gunship shoots down direct RPG shots. While these changes helped some players grasp the feature, we never reached a point where we felt confident that almost everyone understood it. We even considered cutting the feature entirely, but gunship combat without it was much less interesting. The laser guidance forced the player to keep the gunship in sight while the rocket was in flight, but that also meant the gunship had line of sight back, creating a tension we loved.
Odessa Cubbage. Odessa Cubbage is an example of the kind of cameo character we found works well. He's an entertaining guy with some entertaining details, living inside his own little bubble. Since he doesn't leave his scenario, he's free to be exaggerated enough to stand out. We started with his model, which was repurposed from a cut section of the game, and named him after the title of a spam email we received. The model was originally a Norwegian fisherman, and it didn't quite fit as an Englishman, so we slapped a mustache on him, and in that moment, Odessa's character was born. He's ultimately a charlatan, with everything about him being fake. His accent, his mustache, everything. He would never put himself in danger, making him the perfect person to hand Gordon the RPG and explain exactly how to use it.
Odessa Cabbage ezredes a szolgálatára.
Sok szerencsét Nova Prospectben, Dr. Freeman.
Combine gunship. The gunship was an interesting problem. We had a helicopter flight model already and didn't really have time to build something completely new. So we tuned the helicopter's flight model until it felt different enough, and then derived the gunship's organic animation state from the values coming out of that simulation. We also tried to keep it as truthful as possible. For example, there's a limit as how much it can turn its head to aim its cannon, and if it needs to aim beyond that, it has to alter its flight path to bring the cannon around to bear. It's not allowed to just cheat. The other key feature was its engine sound. We have sound spatialization, so the player can tell roughly where it is, but the gunship is a fast-moving object, and it's up in the air, away from any nearby reference points. As a result, it can be hard to tell exactly how far away it is and how fast it's moving. To fix that, we added a Doppler effect to the engine sound, pitch shifting it based on the gunship's velocity relative to you. It's a subtle effect, but it's extremely effective at subconsciously helping you perceive the gunship's location and direction, critical information letting you know that you're being hunted by it.
Flying vehicle audio. The large flying enemies in the game present a unique audio challenge. During combat, they're much more mobile than other enemies, and they often move a significant distance away from the player. They're also really dangerous if they have line of sight. So these factors led us to focus on an audio solution specifically around occlusion, in other words, when you can see the enemy and when the enemy can see you. And we wanted to make a clear audio distinction between when they have that line of sight. So the flying vehicle engine sounds are made up of multiple looping sounds that we play simultaneously. And some of those loops are processed by the DSP system based on the space you're in, while others are played directly and unprocessed. So the DSP system adds more of an environment echoing effect when we run sound through that system. So when the flying object is occluded behind something, it can't see you, we increase the percentage of loops that go through the DSP processing, and it sounds like that object is a little more distant. And then when that enemy emerges from behind an object and it can see you, we play more of the direct sound. So that overall just gives you a sense that the sound is either distant and directionless or more directly in your line of sight. And you can sort of hear it when a helicopter emerges from behind a building. Ideally, you can really hear that difference.
Nos, ez megvolt. Hallom, leszedte a légitankot, Dr. Freeman. Rászolgált a hírnevére, uram. Azonnal kinyittatom valakivel a kaput, hogy tovább indulhasson. Úgy tudom, Dr. Vance nagy bajban van. Óvatosan közelítse meg a hidat. Az ottani helyőrség rádiócsendje miatt azt gyanítom, hogy a kombány elfoglalta, de magának nyilván sikerülni fog. Ha valaki, akkor maga átjut. Viszlát, és kérem, mondja meg Dr. Vance-nek, hogy Cabbage ezredes sajnálja, hogy nem maga mehetett megmenteni.
A Freemannek most sietnie kell. Az Eli Vance nagy bajban van. Van oka a késlekedésnek?
UKO a világítótoronynak. UKO a világítótoronynak. Itt Cabbage ezredes. Jelentkezzen.
Kallongallagilama. Emlékszünk a Freeman.
UKO a világítótoronynak. UKO a világítótoronynak. Itt Cabbage ezredes. Kérem, jelentkezzen.